Good morning, good evening, good whatever time you're listening to this podcast. My name is James Albarn, and welcome to episode 28 of The Last Line. Thank you very much for joining me. On this week's episode, I speak to animal welfare campaigner and founder of the Claws Out campaign, Beth Jennings. The Claws Out campaign aims to end the exploitation of captive lions in South Africa, but I won't go into too much detail myself because you're about to hear Beth tell us the whole story of how she came to found the campaign and what it's led to in her work now. So without further ado, here is Beth Jennings.
So I went to South Africa in 2015, which seems like a lifetime ago now. And I just hated my job at the time and I wanted to take some time out and go and do some volunteering. So I had a look online at all the options and there was this one trip that stood out and it was literally called Live with Lion Cubs in South Africa. And I was like, right, well, who wouldn't want to do that? Okay, so booked it. Did some research beforehand, but at the time there wasn't that much online about it and I wasn't told where I was going until I actually paid my deposit as well.
Which seems a bit mad to me, but...
Yeah, I mean, looking back, it's like that's so...
Not mad from your point of view.
No, it is. It totally is, though. Like, looking back, it's just like, why? That's a red flag, isn't it, surely? And so I looked at lion volunteering in South Africa, like had Googled it and everything. And the only thing that came up was this one specific park it's literally called Lion Park. And so I emailed the agency and I was like, I just want to make sure that I'm not going here. And they were like, yep, you're not going there. Absolutely fine. We don't send volunteers there. So I was like, okay, fine. And I booked it and I paid my money for it over the course of like a year. I think the trip in total cost like £1,500, and that's not including your flights, your vaccinations, and all of that kind of stuff. And it was only a 2-week trip, so I took some time off work and I flew out there on my own, and it just was all downhill from there, really. I mean, the trip itself, like, there's no way around it. You're literally playing with lion cubs all day, every day. Like, that's obviously going to be fun. It was amazing. The lions are amazing. You know, that's obvious. There was a few instances of how they were treating the lions while we were out there that were a bit questionable, and things that we were asked to do that just from like an animal lover's perspective was a bit like of a red flag. So, for instance, there was 5 cubs that were like the size of staffies, I'd say. So like quite big cubs at this point, and they had outgrown their enclosure. But there was no room to move them into the larger enclosure because there was already about 20 lion cubs in that one. So what we had to do instead was lock them in like a crate overnight from the end of our shift until the beginning of the next shift. So that was 5 p.m. till 8 a.m. And it was 5 lion cubs in one crate. And it was like they had...
Sorry, how big would be one of those crates?
Oh, it was just one crate, like, that you'd keep one dog in.
Oh, right.
Yeah. Yeah. And we had to put all of these lion cubs in there, and they had no water. They couldn't go for the toilet. They had no food. Obviously, that stage, they're still on milk, and they didn't have any access to it all night. And we were shown this on our first day, and that was a bit like, oh, okay, that's not good. But they've told us that they're going to be moving these cubs within the next few days, so it's temporary. And then the next morning we went in and let them out, and it was like they'd all urinated like on each other. They were all totally squashed in this crate, and it was just horrible and desperate for water as soon as they came out. So that was the first thing that I was like, okay, that's obviously not good. Second thing, like, you spend all day, you bring tourist groups into the enclosures, and like you're giving them these lion cubs for them to play with and take pictures with. And like you have parents bringing in toddlers into like an enclosure full of lion cubs, and the toddlers are like pulling on the ears and all of this mental stuff. And it's just like, this is an accident waiting to happen, surely.
Yeah, because like you'd be cautious of letting like toddlers do that to a dog, right? And lions
it's a
are
it's a lion. Like I don't have kids, but like I mean, I would never take a child around, like you said, like you stop them from doing that to a dog, or even like a house cat. You know when a house cat is getting annoyed. Yeah. So to just sit there and have that happening, I was like, what is going on here? This is mental. And there was like groups of school children from local schools in South Africa that would come in, and they would literally be passing around these like week-old lion cubs, just passing them around in a circle. And it's like, that's just not good for the lion. Like, they're supposed to be sleeping something like 18 hours a day or something, and they're literally just being used as photo props from the minute we start our shifts until the end of the day. So those were more like issues with welfare. But then in South Africa, there's just a whole wider issue as well about breeding lions in captivity, which is where the bigger problems come in, that I was like semi-aware of, but didn't know the scale that it was happening, basically. I think it's like it's just a mess. In South Africa, anyone can breed lions. Like, if you have land, you can breed a lion. That's all there is to it. You don't need any qualifications in like husbandry or conservation or anything. Like, you can just get a lion and start breeding it, and it's like, that's mental. And there's like, I think it's estimated to be about 200 parks or 300 parks in South Africa breeding lions in captivity. And we were told they would be released into the wild, but that's not true. Like, a captive bred hand-reared lion can never be released into the wild, and has never been in history. And as soon as I asked for proof as well that they had been doing that, and they just couldn't provide it to me. And it's like, if you're the only park in the world that's successfully releasing captive lions into the wild, like, you would want that all over the news. You know, you'd be screaming from the rooftops about it. So that was another thing. I was like, why are they being so weird and secretive about that? So I mean, this all happened in 2 weeks. You know, it was there was other issues on the park, from like a personal perspective. Some of the staff members were just absolutely horrible, like totally rude to women. Like me in particular, I've got tattoos, and they were really derogatory about me having tattoos. So I just felt completely uncomfortable the whole time I was there. And so I left. So within like the first week, I knew something was up, basically. And I messaged a few charities that I found online, and they were like, look, you're there now. You've only got a week left. So just stay there, take pictures, do what you can, and then leave and come home. You like, to paint the picture, I was 21 at the time. This was the first time I had travelled on my own. And you're literally in the middle of nowhere in South Africa. And the only way you can get anywhere is if the staff members are taking you. And I already thought, like, the staff members were not my kind of people. They just weren't very nice people. And the reviews of the park that I was on TripAdvisor, there was a few reviews of people saying that they had spoken up while they were on the park. And one girl in particular was taken into the office with two of the rangers, who are like staff members that look after the lions, and the owners of the park. And they shut her in the office and they searched her phone, basically, because they found out she'd been posting negative things online. And I heard that, and I was just like, right, well, I don't want that to happen to me, obviously. And it was really, hostile is just the word. It was a horrible, horrible atmosphere to be around, especially when I already had like issues with some of the staff members based on things that they had said. So I just thought, I'm just going to keep my mouth shut. And as soon as you start asking questions, they do give you answers, but they're so well rehearsed. And as soon as you start like digging a bit more, they're just so suspicious about why you're asking it. And there was an issue as well with something that I had tweeted before I knew all of this. I tweeted something while I was there, and deleted it within a day. And they knew about that tweet. They brought it up after I deleted it. So I was like, right, okay, so I was right. And you were looking at my Instagram, my social media while I was there. But that was a whole nother issue.
That seems a bit weird.
Yeah. Yeah.
So you decided to sort of just wait it out until you could go home again. I guess it's not, cost prohibitive anyway, I guess, to get another flight out. But I guess it's not easy just to be like, okay, bye, I'm going now after a few days.
Yeah, exactly. And like, I had saved up for a year for that trip. I used all of my like birthday money. I wasn't well off at that point. It was like a huge amount of money for me to spend on something. And even like the replacement flight home, my dad was like offering to come out and get me, and that would have cost like $2,000 extra or something ridiculous. And I was like, no, it's just not worth it. Like, I'm not in any danger.
Yeah.
Like, they're not going to kill me while I'm on this park. It wasn't that extreme. And for the second week anyway, you're offered like excursions type thing. So for the second week, I was barely even on the park. I didn't interact with any of the lions and just was out of there as much as I could be anyway.
So these parks, so take this specific one, for example, they're just so that it's clear for the audience, they're offering, as a tourist, you would go out. So you're in South Africa and you want to go to this park, and you get to like play with the lion cubs.
Yeah. So there's like different stages. So you can either play with like the tiny newborn lion cubs, or you can go on an excursion called Walking with Lions. So you go walking in the bush with like slightly older lions, like 6 to 8 months old. So pretty big lions.
They looked quite big in the film.
It's stupid. It shouldn't be allowed. And you're told that they're tame and stuff, and you're given like a stick to defend yourself. And it's like, if a lion wants to attack you, a stick is not going to do shit, is it? Like, excuse the language, like, you're going to die. And there's been attacks in the past, and they don't tell the public this. I found out just while I was on the park from Googling it, that the one that I was on, a man and his wife were both attacked, and they needed skin grafts. That's how serious it was. And recently, just I think it was either last year or the year before, a woman was killed on another park by a lion. So it's not safe at all. Like, and the fact that they've been bred in captivity, they're still wild animals. They're still not. You just shouldn't be that close to them.
And perhaps like a little pissed off as well. Like, I imagine it's not a great. Those lions are not like probably don't have a great temperament in terms of being caged up all that. A lion wants to roam free, doesn't it? It doesn't want to be kept in a cage. I was watching, sort of prompted by this, I ended up rewatching an old Louis Theroux documentary I think it's called African Hunting Holiday, and it's about that sort of canned hunting thing, which we can talk more about. But there's just a clip where they're obviously they're on the sort of perimeter fence of where they keep these lions, which people just go and pay to hunt. And the you can see the way the lions are looking at like Louis Theroux and this guy through the those lions are ready to fucking take him out. And even the guy says, who's like running the whole park, he's like, if you got in there right now, there'd be nothing left from the top of your head to like your boots. And so it amazed me when I saw the sort of the short film that you made, that those walks with those lions looked, because when they're like little cubs, you're like, oh, they're cute, and then you see the size they are when they're walking around. It's like, Jesus, we're letting people just walk alongside them with like nothing to stop them turning around and having a pop.
Yeah, exactly. And it's groups of like up to 10 people with 2 rangers or something. So the rangers are the only people like barely qualified to even be there themselves. So it's just awful. And you're given like dare I call it a safety briefing, because it's not even really that. And it's like, don't turn your back to a lion. And it's like, no shit. Like, is that all, is that all you're giving me? Like, I know that. Obviously, don't turn your back to a lion. But then, like, even front on, it's still going to try and have you for dinner, isn't it? And like, obviously these ones, they are hand reared from birth, so they are habituated to humans, so it is different from, you obviously wouldn't go into an enclosure with a wild lion. So it is slightly different. They are more tame, but at the end of the day, they're still, they've got their instincts. They're a wild animal. If they decide they want to attack you, they're going to do that, and no amount of wielding a wooden stick is going to stop that.
I guess the thing as well that sort of stupidly didn't occur to me until, well, I guess it's not stupid, because it probably didn't occur to you either, right? Is that when I was watching your short film, is I suddenly thought, well, yeah, like if you've got volunteers coming in, a new bunch of volunteers every couple of weeks, like they're not sufficiently trained to be dealing with lions. So is this like a legit, sort of, we're looking after lions here, when the people you're sort of getting to look after them are people who just don't know anything, really. Essentially, they're just
it's a bunch of absolutely useless teenagers that just happen to be able to afford this trip. Like, that's all it is. I don't I don't know anything about raising a lion cub. Of course I don't. I was working in a secretary firm in Buckinghamshire. Like, why am I qualified to go and look after your lions for 2 weeks? That's another huge issue, is that we like, volunteers are paying such huge amounts of money. And one of the biggest arguments is that these places give back to local communities, etc., etc. And it's like, well, if that's the case, why aren't you paying people from the local community to do this job? Why are you making volunteers pay you to go in and do the job? It's just all completely backwards, and no one there is qualified to be looking after these lions.
So you get to the end of your 2 weeks, you get on the plane, you're going home. What happened then in terms of the sort of the cogs started whirring, I guess?
So I was like livid, basically. I was so angry that I'd become like involved in this, and obviously really, really upset as well. That's, my work. I went out there because I love animals and always have. Like, so the thought that I'd become involved with this upset me, but also just like annoyed me so much that I'd been duped into it. So on the flight home, literally, I was writing my blog, and I thought, I'll just write like one blog post to put out on my social media, mainly because in the whole lead up to the trip, I'd been like, oh my God, how amazing is this? Blah, blah, blah. That, like, posting that I'm going to go and play with lion cubs for 2 weeks. And so it was more like I wanted to just put out to the people, my friends on social media, and just say, it might have looked amazing, but this is actually what happened. And after speaking to a few people in the charities that I'd worked with, they were like, yeah, you should make it into like a blog, into a website or whatever. And so I did. And at that time, when I did it in 2015, there wasn't really any volunteers like doing that or speaking out against the industry. So it kind of like accidentally blew up into something that like I wasn't expecting at all. And it kind of started from there, and it was still just my blog online for a couple of years before it became my job. But at that time, it was just to kind of raise awareness to other volunteers and try and warn other people that that's what they're getting themselves into if they go and volunteer in these places. And it just kind of snowballed, I guess, from there. So
what's the aim of the campaign, I guess, is the question.
So my campaign is primarily to raise awareness. There are campaigns like on the ground in South Africa that are much better equipped to deal with like the legalities side of things. So mine was to raise awareness to volunteers and also to the travel industry, like, so the agents that were sending people there. Because I booked my trip through like a really reputable UK agency. And I was just again, just pissed off that they'd let me do that, and they were still trying to maintain that it was totally ethical, the trip that I'd gone to do. So I had my complaint was open with them for 3 years, I think, before they stopped selling the trip. And that was only because they sold the company anyway into new hands. So yeah, I started it to raise awareness, and that's sort of where it grew into my full-time job. Just mainly, education is, I guess, what I'd say is the main part of the campaign.
And presumably there are sort of all sorts of places in South Africa that you can go to that actually would help lions and conservation. And you mentioned, I saw you mention about how basically if it's ever offering you hands-on work with lions, that's not a place to go to.
I think that's where it becomes difficult, is that all the places that are ethical for you to go and volunteer at, you're not going to be playing with lion cubs all day, and that's obviously not as good, is it, really? You're going to be painting fences and cleaning enclosures and doing paperwork and stuff, and that's so important, but not as enticing, is it, when you look at the other side of it? But yeah, basically in South Africa, any place that's breeding lion cubs for tourists to go and interact with is not ethical, because those lions can't be released into the wild. And that's where canned hunting comes into it, because that's the only place that they can go into in South Africa, unless they're sold into zoos, or there's also the lion bone trade as well, which is a fairly new issue. So there's these 10,000 lions in captivity in South Africa that are constantly being bred for tourists and then being sold once they're too big for tourists to interact with. And that's where the hunting comes into it as well.
And for anyone that's listening that doesn't know what canned hunting is, you're probably in a better position probably to give an explanation than me.
Yeah, so canned hunting is basically a trophy hunt within an enclosure. So the lion can't escape from you, and it's hand-reared, so it's not scared of a human either. So, for instance, if you do a wild lion hunt, you pay upwards of $50,000, and you're on a hunt for 21 days, and there's no guarantee that you'll even get a lion. So with a canned hunt, you're put inside a fenced enclosure, you pay sometimes $10,000. The lion can't escape, you shoot your lion, it can't run away from you, you take the trophy home the same day. So it's just ridiculous. There's no way for that lion to escape from you. And it takes no skill either.
In the Louis Theroux documentary about it, he describes it as playing tennis without a net, which I thought was quite a good analogy for it.
Yeah, and the ease of it is ridiculous. When I was doing some of the research for the short film that I made, I emailed a place inquiring about a canned hunt, and I was like, oh hey, I'm a 22-year-old girl from England, I've never held a gun, but I really want to come and do a canned hunt. And they were like, oh, okay, sure, here's basically a menu for you to choose from. Pick the lion that you want, and the prices range from female lions were really cheap, male lions with a big black mane were a bit more expensive. And so I could have just chosen my lion, gone there, having never held a gun, gone into enclosure, killed my lion, and brought this trophy home. It
sounds mental that you can pick the specific lion.
Yeah, it's just mind-blowing, and people don't realize it's happening, especially on such a huge scale in South Africa.
And I keep referring to this Louis Theroux thing, but it's in my mind because I've literally just watched it. Their argument for some of it was that, well, if we don't breed these animals to be hunted, then they'll just go extinct, because
that's just infuriatingly incorrect. There's never ever been any research to say that canned hunting improves the welfare of wild lions. And in fact, in the last 20 years, while canned hunting's been going on, wild lion populations are still declining. So it's like
so we're not seeing an increase off the back of it.
No, it's not at all. It's so wrong. But like, people believe it. People believe what they want to believe, don't they? Like, if you're told you can go and cuddle a lion cub and it's going to benefit wild lions, it's like, oh, great. Like, I won't do any more research. That sounds great, but it's just totally incorrect.
And I guess as well, the argument is a counter argument to that whole thing of, well, they would be extinct if we didn't breed them to be hunted. Even if that was true, which not, there's a sort of bigger moral dilemma there anyway. A question of like, well, if you are just breeding something for it to then get shot in an enclosure, what kind of life is that anyway for an animal? Mm-hmm. So even if it did increase numbers, which it doesn't, it's still not really an argument for canned hunting anyway.
Yeah. I mean, that's the issue, isn't it? Is that it's a moral issue, I guess. Like, if you're fine with going and shooting a lion, regardless of whether or not it benefits conservation, then in my opinion, you're a bit of a like terrible human being. Like, there's no other way to say it. Like, I'm against all forms of hunting. And like you said, if it did benefit conservation, then like there would be more of an argument for it. But yeah, the fact is that it just doesn't. So you're still a crap human being.
The other thing that struck me was, because I guess like canned hunting is kind of on the sort of extreme end of the moral question, right? Like, most of us, I would say, would probably be against canned hunting. I would imagine. I'd hope, anyway.
I'd hope, yeah.
But like, most of us couldn't envision going and shooting a lion, right? But most of it. But I would also say most of us could go and envision cuddling a little lion cub, right? So how difficult is it to convince people, and people who want to go and volunteer, as you initially did, how difficult is it to convince people that these places, despite saying they're ethical and all this kind of stuff, aren't what they appear? Because it's probably quite hard to, if you want to go and do something like that, it's quite hard to tell people they shouldn't.
Yeah, I mean, it's ignorance is bliss, isn't it? Like, I've had so many people contact me through my website and with messages like, oh, this is the place I'm going to look at volunteering. They say they're ethical. And I look at it and they're one of the worst ones. And I tell them that and I send them all of the information and they don't believe me and they go and volunteer anyway. So it's like, if you're comfortable going and volunteering somewhere where you know that those lions will end up shot by a hunter, then that's your moral issue, in my opinion. The problem I have as well is that there's so many people going in not knowing that that's the link, that those lions they're cuddling will be shot in 1 or 2 years. So that's where I try and raise awareness. So if you know that and you go and do it, that's, not what I agree with, but you're doing it informed. But it's the people that don't know that that's what they're doing and refuse to believe that that's what they're doing. And it is hard to convince people because they want their Instagram post, don't they? They want to go and cuddle lions and be able to say, oh my God, look, this is what I've done. Aren't I amazing? I've helped all of these wild lions, when that's just not the case. So yeah, it is really difficult, basically. Yeah.
I wonder if social media has like a part to play in these places continuing to run, because I guess like before we could post these kind of pictures on Instagram, perhaps like, I mean, I don't know, I'm completely speaking out my arse here, but I imagine like those places weren't necessarily as popular, right, or at least known about, because if you see your friend posting a picture of them and a lion, I guess that's quite appealing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, 100%. I mean, I was guilty of it. I put all of my pictures on Instagram, granted only for like a week or so before I took them down. But it's 100% the issue. And a lot of these places, excuse me, invite celebrities out as well. So they post on their Instagrams, which is just an even wider audience. So it's definitely making the issue worse. And like they bring in some measures on Instagram. If you search like lion selfie or something, it comes up with a warning, and then you just click OK and the pictures are there anyway. So more definitely needs to be done by social media, such as Instagram and Twitter and Facebook, not to promote these places, in my opinion. But that's like a near impossible job, especially TikTok now as well is one of the worst ones.
Oh, right. Okay. I hadn't even thought about TikTok. I mean, I guess like social media, it's another thing in a long line of things that social media needs to like figure out in terms of how was it for you sort of coming to terms with it afterwards? Because I guess you were really excited, sort of trip of a lifetime, and it wasn't what you wanted at all. How do you cope with that when you come back, in terms of are there feelings of guilt? Are there feelings of I've been conned? What was your sort of mindset like afterwards?
All of the above. Like in all honesty, if I'm totally honest, within a couple of months of coming home, my mental health just took an absolute nosedive. I was put on antidepressants by my doctor. I stopped going to work. Like I couldn't function because of how the whole experience had affected me. And not only the experience while I was there, but also the aftermath. So the actual complaints procedure, I know it sounds ridiculous, was like one of the most stressful times of my life. Some of the accusations that were thrown at me by the park were just absolutely awful. So I really, really struggled. And I suppose that's another reason why I kept Claws Out going, was because I had to channel it somewhere and convince myself that I could make amends for the mistake that I had made by raising awareness. But it's something that I still struggle with. But at the same time, especially I find that campaign against it, and I'm fortunate enough to campaign alongside some amazing big names like Born Free, Olsen Trust, all of these amazing charities. And a few times I'm sort of sat there just well, why am I here? I'm I'm the problem. I was a volunteer, so it's comes and goes. It's still difficult now. But at the same time, now I work full time in animal welfare, and I have the jobs I've had and that I do now because of that experience. So I wouldn't be doing it now. But yeah, it's definitely something that I still struggle with.
And don't answer this if you don't want to talk about it. But you mentioned about how the park threw sort of accusations at you when you were complaining, and you don't have to go into what those accusations were if you don't want to. But I think it speaks to sort of a bigger problem with how it's like when you were there, right? And if people asked too many questions, they would get sketchy and check people's phones and stuff. So I guess I'm asking because of that sort of pattern of behavior that occurs with these places and how they treat people who want to question what they do. Yeah, so I'm happy to talk about it because it's just so embarrassing on their end, I think. So yeah, my complaints procedure went through the travel agency, and I complained about the welfare issues and also the fact that I'd been sold this trip that wasn't what it was. And they went to the park with my complaint and asked for their side of the story, obviously, fair enough. And the park came back saying that I had mental health issues. This was before I actually did, by the way. But saying that I was just a bit of a nutcase that had come to the park to try and expose them and hadn't succeeded. So now was on a rampage, I think was the phrase they used. They also said that
during my time at the park, I'd taken drugs, and that I'd had a relationship with a member of staff, which was against the rules, which is also just absolutely not true. Like, I was in a relationship at the time, and that was just really, really awful to be accused of these things. And I was getting all of these letters back from the travel agents, and I was just like, are you hearing this? Like, are you reading these letters before you forward them on? Like, what kind of reputable company would throw out accusations like this about a 21-year-old girl that's like complaining about animal welfare issues, and you're calling me like a drug taking, like cheating maniac, basically, to try and like damage my reputation as well. And yeah, it was just like this embarrassing for them ongoing thing for like 3 years. And it came down to really petty things as well, like things like I had told them, oh God, I don't even know if it's not even interesting enough to say. So I was just saying like bullet points of things they had done wrong on the park, and they accused me of lying, and I was like, they have CCTV, like you can check it if you care enough. Like, I'm not lying. I've got no reason to lie about any of this. All I wanted from the company was my money back and for them to stop selling the trip. And I think it got to, in the end, they offered me £500 if I signed like a confidentiality agreement to never mention it again, to never talk about them again. And I was like, well, you know what you can do with that. I was like, I'm not signing that. Piss off, basically. And that's when the company was then sold to a new manager, and they took down all of the animal trips. So, yeah. Sorry, I get really passionate when I talk about that.
No, it's good. No.
Riles me up.
You mentioned actually that for other campaigners that sort of do this work, that they get like death threats and all that kind of stuff. Like, it's I guess because it's such a huge industry, right? They must make a fortune off of these things. I mean, even the fact that you would pay 1,500 quid to go there as a volunteer. How many volunteers are on like sort of a trip with, so when you were there?
I mean, if I was estimating when I was there, I'd say there was like 20.
Right.
And those are constantly like recycling every 2 weeks or 3 weeks or however long they're there, which is just too many. Like, there's not enough work for that many people to be doing on these parks. Like, it's just ridiculous.
So what kind of
I'm so sorry.
That's all right. What kind of work were you actually doing as a volunteer there? What would you actually do?
So your days are split between cub duties or ranger duties, they call it, on this particular park anyway. So on the cub days, you're literally cuddling lion cubs, letting them have photos with tourists, feeding them, playing with them, literally just sitting with them in the sun all day, basically. And on the ranger duties, it's more like cutting up chicken, going to like parks nearby to fetch vegetables for like the other animals, that kind of stuff, really.
We talked about how if you're a volunteer looking for these experiences, that, you know, what to sort of look out for in terms of what the red flags are. If you're a tourist, say you're in South Africa looking for things to do, what are the things to look out for as a tourist? Is it basically the same as volunteering? Like, if you're going to be interacting with lions, probably shouldn't be going there. Is that?
Yeah, 100%. That's it. If they're offering you any kind of interaction with a big cat, you know, it's not just lions actually in South Africa. It's like cheetahs, sometimes tigers for some reason.
In Africa.
Oh yeah, exactly.
Okay.
There was tigers on the park that I was at as well, like fully grown adult tigers that they were breeding, and cheetahs as well. So yeah, anywhere that's offering you these interactions, it's obviously a quick fix for you. You get to go and do it for 20 minutes or whatever. But it's just worth considering that's like that lion's entire life is doing that, and you know, it's obviously going to end up in canned hunting.
I guess as well, like tigers, what other reason would there be for tigers being in Africa other than we're going to sell them at some point to someone?
Yeah, exactly. It just absolutely makes no sense whatsoever. Yeah. I don't even know what more to say about it.
There's no reason
ridiculous
for tigers to be in Africa. There's just that's it.
Yeah, literally. And anyone with common sense should know that and should question that. But sadly, people don't.
What do you think of things like? I mean, I guess I'm probably going to know your answer because it's probably the same thing I think about it. But these things, I mean, like Tiger King, right, was like a fucking huge show. Not just because of the animals in it, but because of the characters and all that kind of stuff.
It's just a car crash.
It was a car crash of a thing. But what, there's that whole sort of industry in America, which we fortunately don't really have over here, I guess because we don't have enough big, massive spaces to keep these things. About that industry in America of having sort of, actually, funnily enough, that was another Louis Theroux documentary, Exotic Pets, wasn't it? It feels like it's the same sort of thing, really, doesn't it? In terms of tourists go and see these things, it's just they're much more out. It's just in America you can see clearly that, like, well, lions and tigers aren't really supposed to be.
I mean, you'd think, you and I could easily, but not everyone sadly thinks like that. But America is like a whole nother issue.
Yeah.
The big cats that are kept as pets over there are just, it's out of control. I think I saw a stat that was like, there's more pet tigers in the US than there are wild tigers left in the world. Yeah, and it's like, why? Why is that allowed to happen? Who is letting this happen? Like, that needs to be stopped altogether. But as we all saw in Tiger King, like, there is an audience for it. Like, they were packed out with tourists every single day because they can so easily brand themselves as a zoo or as conservation. And people just believe that because, like, why would someone lie about that almost? Do you know what I mean? Like, yeah, I don't know. Not everyone questions it enough, I don't think.
Is there a similar? I mean, I don't know if you'll be able to answer this, but are there much sort of stricter rules in the UK about what is classed as conservation and what's not in terms of zoos and safari parks here? Because I don't know. I have a sort of. And I don't know how justified it is, but I don't really like the idea of zoos as places. Yeah, so that's like, that's a difficult one to answer because I personally don't like zoos either. But there are instances where like actual good zoos are doing good work for conservation. Yeah.
With species that I don't know anything about. I can't claim to be an expert on anything else. But in some cases, zoos can help conservation. I don't argue with that. But me personally, I don't think that any animal should be kept confined in captivity. Yeah. So it's kind of another moral
question.
Yeah. And you can kind of like, it's you can go to a zoo and see like a lion like pacing up and down the enclosure, and you can tell that it's bored and that it's stressed and that it's not meant to be there. But it's like, again, with that captive lion, the same with all of the captive lions in South Africa, that's the only place it can be. It can't be released into the wild. So if it can be kept there for the entirety of its life, and if it can help research only with zoos, not with the captive ones in South Africa, then I don't think that's the worst one in the world, because the only other option is to sadly put that animal down. So,
because I went to the last zoo I went to was New York Zoo. This was years ago, probably like 10 years ago. But I just remember coming out of that feeling really sad, because a lot of the animals. And New York Zoo might do great work for conservation, I don't know. But it just, there were so many animals that just looked like they didn't want to be there. A particularly sad polar bear springs to mind, who just was
God.
just, sort of.
Why is there a polar bear in New York?
Exactly, right?
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree with you. I find them just awful places to be. I don't remember the last time I went to a zoo. I think even the last time I was near one was I went to Berlin, and I don't know if you've been, but they have like a shopping mall that surrounds the zoo. So weird. you're like literally shopping, and there's a window with like a monkey on the other side, and it's like, come on, guys, like this isn't okay. What are we doing here? Like, I think there's still so much that needs to be done about zoos in general, and charities like that's not what I focus on, but charities like Born Free, that's their main focus. But yeah, I'm totally on the same page as you with that.
So you mentioned earlier that doing claws out and stuff has led to you working full time in, would you say conservation, I guess, or animal welfare, or how would you put it?
Yeah, animal welfare. So before COVID, good times, I was working full time on claws out. I was really lucky to be able to do that. For a UK-based charity, they were paying me to run the campaign, and that was with funding from Born Free Foundation and Olsen Animal Trust that was supporting it. And then COVID came, and I was furloughed, and then sadly lost my job because we just lost all fundraising, basically, that we were supposed to do throughout the year. But I was really lucky that I now work in animal welfare for another charity, but on dog and cat welfare. So more like companion animal welfare, but internationally. So like the illegal puppy trade and the dog and cat meat trade are the two campaigns that I work on. And I run claws out like in my own time, basically.
Sure. Can we talk about that a little bit? That sounds.
Yeah, sure.
So, I don't really know what to ask, but
I mean, I could just talk.
Yeah.
Just know what I do.
Yeah, great interviewing technique there of just not asking you a question.
That's fine. So it's for a charity called Four Paws International, who are an amazing charity. There's offices like all over the world, and they actually have a sanctuary in South Africa, an amazing sanctuary called Lions Rock for lions, obviously, it's in the name. And that's how I knew Four Paws, was because they were so supportive of my campaign. And then I found out they had this job available when I lost my job, and I applied and very luckily got it. And so, my time is split between a campaign against the illegal puppy trade in Europe and the dog and cat meat trade in Southeast Asia, which specifically Cambodia, Vietnam and Indonesia. And I'm part of these just amazing, amazing teams that on the ground in those countries, even literally yesterday, we shut down a slaughterhouse in Cambodia and rescued some dogs and cats. And then we work with partners to get those rehomed. A lot of it is campaigning the local governments as well to end the dog and cat meat trade in those countries. And we also campaign European governments to help try and end those as well and protect tourists. Because obviously since COVID as well, there's a huge focus on health risks when it comes to animals, because that's, supposedly, I don't know the facts, but how COVID came about. So that's what we're focusing on at the moment, because a lot of these dogs that are in these slaughterhouses have major health issues like rabies or parvovirus, and then humans are also consuming that. So it's like there's a human health risk that we're focusing on at the moment. And obviously it's just insanely cruel. Like the methods they use to kill these animals are just beyond awful. And with the illegal puppy trade stuff, there's since COVID as well, and since the pandemic, everyone wants a dog. So the average price of a dog has gone from like £500 to upwards of £2,000 in the UK, which means the demand is like out of control, and people, I mean, it's not a new issue since COVID, but people have been smuggling dogs into the country for just years and years. So we work on that campaign. trying to like regulate the online trade, I guess. So to try and stop illegal breeders being able to sell online in the UK and across the whole of Europe as well. So a lot of lobbying work for the government. It's a lot.
The dog and cat meat trade. This may be a really stupid question, but because it's obviously legal in those countries to be slaughtering dogs and cats for meat and selling the meat, how like on what basis, I guess, do you get these places shut down? Because presumably they would argue like, well, it's legal to do it, and there's not me criticizing, obviously. It's great that they're shut down.
Oh, yeah.
But like, how do you go about getting them shut down? Is it like anything over here? Like they have to hit certain criteria of health and of safety and all that kind of stuff, and you get them shut down on those bases, or?
Sadly not. So what we do is we offer livelihood conversions. So we approach slaughterhouses and the people that run them, and we say more often than not, they don't want to be doing it, but it's their only source of income. And even worse than that is that a lot of the animals they get are stolen pets. So there's literally trucks roaming around, picking up dogs off the street and taking them to these slaughterhouses. So that's illegal, obviously. So there's that. But then what we do is we will close down the slaughterhouse and take all of the animals off of them with their agreement as well. And then we will offer them a livelihood conversion. So we will help them do something that they want to do. So for instance, the one that we did yesterday, we're helping him build like a general store type thing, and also like a motorbike repair garage, I think, or something like that, because that's what he wants to be doing, but he didn't have the money to be able to do that. So we're, as a charity, helping him do that and rescuing the dogs as well.
Oh, okay. That's quite nice.
It's pretty cool. Yeah.
That's quite cool. Maybe a good thing to end on would be, anything you think I haven't covered enough, anything you think needs saying that I haven't said, but also what people can do, I guess, to help, or organizations they can follow, or etc.
Yeah, I guess one thing worth mentioning as well that people don't realize is happening with regards to the lions in South Africa is the lion bone trade. So I'm sure a lot of people are aware of the tiger bone trade, and that across Asia, you can buy tiger bone illegally that are made into so-called medicines that can help. Well, they can't help, but are sold as helping various illnesses. And people don't realize now that tiger numbers are so depleted that they're using lion bones instead to make those medicines. So the lions in South Africa, not only are they sold in canned hunting, but the South African government is permitting the sale of lion bones across to the markets in Asia, which is putting wild lions at risk of poaching, because obviously there's a market now for those bones to be sold. And there's links to crime syndicates across Southeast Asia as well that are selling these lion bones. So I guess that's the other part of my campaign, is making those tourists aware that not only are they cuddling lion cubs that are probably going to be killed in a canned hunt, but also their bones are now being sold overseas as these phony Asian medicines that just there's reports of lions that have arthritis, that they've been bred so badly that the lions have arthritis, and their bones are being sold in medicines to cure human arthritis. Yeah, you can't make this up, honestly. It's ridiculous. But that's the only other thing that I thought was worth touching on with the lion stuff.
I guess it's great to talk about all these things, and it's good to sort of educate oneself about these things, but then you also, unless you're someone like you who is doing good work around this stuff, you could be listening to this and feeling sort of well, that's awful, but I don't really know what I can do about it. I'm not planning on going on a trip to South Africa to be able to avoid these places anyway. So is there things that people can do to either to help or to like raise awareness or to give to charity? Like, what can people do to feel less sort of useless around these things, I guess?
I mean, in my opinion, like education is key. So even if you're not going to go and volunteer in South Africa, you can still share the message that doing it is wrong, and you might be able to stop another person going to do it instead. So there's loads of resources online, I think, that can be shared, not just as like a plug for my stuff, which you can share if you like, but there's other films. There's a film called Blood Lions, which is a 90-minute documentary, which is just amazing, and I recommend it to everyone to watch it if you've got the time. And then there's my film, which is 15 minutes. So if you want a bit of a shorter one, you can watch that. So charities that you can support, I'd say Born Free Foundation do amazing work. Four Paws in South Africa are actually like on the ground doing amazing work. So are Born Free. So if it's a monetary thing, and if you want to make donations, you can donate to the charities on the ground in South Africa that are doing the hands-on difference. Whereas I would say like donating to me isn't worth your time. You can donate to my charity if you like, but like I would prefer that your money goes to somewhere on the ground that is going to help an individual lion. And there's loads of things you can do. You can write to the UK governments and say that you want imports of trophies to be banned into the UK, which they're currently not.
Oh, what? So you can go and...
I think so.
Because that had never occurred to me that you could then take it home with you, but I guess that's the reason people do it. So
yeah, I'm 99% sure that the UK haven't banned it. Some countries have, which is amazing. But the UK government, I think, I might be wrong on this, and it's bad if I am, but I'm pretty sure they haven't banned it yet.
Because there's that actually. There's that bit in the Louis Theroux documentary I mentioned, is that Louis Theroux sort of points at I think they're, I'm going to get the name of the animal wrong because they all look very similar. Like, there's some kind of like ibex or deer or
oh yeah, I wouldn't be able to.
They all look very similar, right? But they're looking at them, and Louis Theroux goes, it's quite a sad existence, really, isn't it, for these animals? And the guy goes, no, because they're going to become a head on a wall. They're going to get a space on the wall, and you don't even get a space on the wall. And these animals are going to get, as if that was like a thing for the animal to be proud of. You know what I mean?
I mean, it's just like psychotic, isn't it? Like, why? Like, if someone murdered a human and then mounted that human's head on the wall of their office, you'd be like, okay, you have something wrong with you. So why is it any different when it comes to wild animals? That's what I think. I just think it's mind-blowing that people think that that's a good thing. Like, if I went into someone's house and they had a lion's head mounted on the wall, like, I would immediately leave. Like, that's not someone that I want to be around.
No. And it's the kind of person as well that you may be like, oh, maybe because like if you think about any horror film, like the murderers do have lions' heads and that on the wall.
Yeah.
So there you have it, Beth Jennings. My thanks to Beth for joining me on the show, and my thanks to you, the listener, for joining me this week. If you like the show, then please do subscribe, share it with your friends, share it with your family, share it with whoever you can convince to listen to a podcast every week. And if you would like to support the show further, then you can go to patreon.com/The Last Line and support us in that way. There will be links in the description to Beth's short film that she made about the Claws Out campaign. that we mentioned earlier, and to some of the organizations that she talked about as well, if you want to check them out further and support them in any way you can. So, until next time, thank you very much for listening and joining me this week. And until next time, I've been James Albarn, and this is The Last Line.